Okay, welcome back to the International Relations and Cooperation course. And in this series of lectures, we'll be talking about war. And we have some objectives. And the objectives are to recognize the different kinds of international military conflicts. You know, what are the different kinds of wars that there are? And then also to understand how conflicts of interest between countries can be the immediate causes of war. So, in this lecture, I'm going to start by talking about the wars between countries. And specifically, I'm going to talk about the types of military conflicts and also the incidence of international military conflicts. Incidence means frequency. So, how frequent are they increasing or are they decreasing? And then also the lethality of war and how lethal or how dangerous are the international wars? How many people are wounded or killed in wars? The second part of the lecture, I'm going to talk about immediate causes of war. We'll talk about conflicts of interest, especially over economic resources. We'll look at policy disagreements, political regimes, ethnic and religious identity, and finally, territory. So, in terms of the types of conflicts between countries, the first one we're going to talk about is interstate war. This is when two or more national governments direct their military against each other in some type of organized, sustained, and often deadly clash or confrontation. This means that a common description is that at least 1,000 soldiers die in fighting between the countries over 1 year. So the current war between Russia and Ukraine is the most recent example. The second type, we're going to talk about general or major wars, and a war that involves many or all of the most powerful states in a particular historical era. So in the first lecture, we talked about the 30 Years' War, also the Napoleonic Wars, and then both world wars, World War I and World War II, are examples of general war or major war. And another type of war is the hegemonic war. And this is a war where the outcome determines which states will have dominant influence or be the predominant influence in the international system in the coming years or even decades. So the war between Athens and Sparta, again, the Peloponnesian War, the outcome of that determined the future leaders. And World War II, the Allied powers versus the Axis powers, these are also examples of hegemonic wars. And total war is a war in which hostile states mobilize all resources and target civilians as part of their war strategy. And if we look at American history, the American Civil War is an example, and then also both world wars, World War I and World War II, are examples of total war. Again, where the hostile states mobilize all their resources and target civilians. So moving on to other types of conflicts, we're going to talk about MIDS, and MIDS is a militarized interstate dispute. So this is an instance in which a state threatens to use force against another state, mobilizes or moves military forces against the other in a threatening manner, or two states engage in military clashes at a level of severity below full-scale war. So two recent examples are China's territorial claims in the South China Sea and also North Korea's military posture or provocations. So it hasn't turned into a full-scale war. We call these MIDS, or militarized interstate disputes. There's another type of war, extra-state war. This is a violent clash resulting in at least 1,000 combat deaths between the national government of a recognized state and an entity that is not an internationally recognized state or a non-state actor located in a foreign state. The USA's war against the Taliban in Afghanistan is one example, and another is the current war in Israel and Israel's fight against Hamas. Next, we're going to talk about the incidence or frequency of war. So in this chart, for each designated time period, the bar represents the average annual number of interstate wars launched during the period. The number in parenthesis at the bottom is the total number of interstate wars launched during the period. So in this figure, we can see that after steadily increasing for almost 2 centuries, the average annual incidence of interstate wars has declined since the end of the Cold War. And in this chart, for each designated time period, the bar represents the average annual number of MIDs. Remember, that's the militarized interstate disputes that were launched during the period. The number in parenthesis is the total number of MIDs launched during the period. And in contrast to the pattern we observed in connection to interstate wars, the average annual incidence of new MIDs has not declined since the end of the Cold War, and perhaps has slightly increased. And compared to the first half of the 20th century, uses of force more typically characterized MIDs during the Cold War. So the use of force, so you can see the part in green, the use of force during MIDs has slowed or decreased to some degree in the post-Cold War period compared to the Cold War era or the years between 1900 and 1945. So you can see that more recently there's these displays, and that's kind of showing the military force but not actually using it. So I think North Korea launching the missiles, test missiles, is one type of display of force. And for each designated time period in this chart, the bar represents the average annual number of extra-state wars launched during the period, and the number of parentheses is the total number of extra-state wars launched. Extra-state wars declined in incidence during the first and especially the second half of the 20th century, reflecting in part the end of colonialism during the first half of the 20th century. Moving to the lethality of international wars, wars can be very dangerous, causing people to get hurt or even lose their lives. So history has shown us how deadly these conflicts can be, especially big wars like World Wars I and World War II. These wars didn't just harm many people, they also brought huge changes to the countries. Because of the serious harm caused by these large-scale wars, countries nowadays try to avoid such massive conflicts. However, danger still exists even when the conflicts aren't as big as world wars. When countries have disagreements and decide to use their military forces, it often leads to people getting injured or killed. Even smaller or shorter conflicts carry risks. Sometimes the danger increases when these disputes occur within a country and external groups decide to get involved. So recognizing the harm that comes from military conflicts, people around the world are trying to find different ways to resolve issues ways that don't involve fighting. Despite these efforts, though, conflicts continue to occur. And we've seen it most recently in the news, the last couple of years and especially the last couple of weeks. And they often result in serious harm. So that's why it's so crucial for countries to collaborate and find peaceful solutions to their problems, which would lead to fewer injuries and lives lost. So today, compared to the past, people are much safer from dangers of war. This period of relative peace is significant, and one of the most pressing questions is whether this long peace will continue. The reduction in the deadliness of war over time is likely influenced by factors like the deterrent role of nuclear weapons and the rise of democratic governance. Recent conflicts such as those in Iraq and Afghanistan have been less deadly compared to those that occurred during the Cold War era. So we want to move next to the causes of war, and especially the immediate causes of war. And we're going to talk about these 5 points. So first of all, in terms of economic resources, countries they often clash over scarce resources. For instance, the Arab-Israeli War in 1967 was caused by or increased in part by disputes over water resources. Energy resources like oil and natural gas have also been the center of conflicts. One example is Iraq's invasion of Kuwait in 1990. In terms of political disagreements, nations' differing policies can lead to military disputes. For example, Israel launched airstrikes against a suspected nuclear site in Syria in 2007, preventing what it saw as a potential nuclear threat. So this was a policy disagreement. And political regimes. So wars can erupt when conflicts over national governance styles or ideologies, with parties believing the political systems of others pose existential threats, so threaten the existence of the country. So those political regime changes can be the cause for immediate cause for military conflict. Looking at ethnic or religious identity, ethnic tensions can spark international conflicts. NATO's 1999 attack on Serbia was a response to the Serbian government's violence against ethnic Albanians in Kosovo. Finally, in terms of territorial disputes are common cause of conflict, often due to the economic or strategic value of land. For example, Israel's capture of the Golan Heights from Syria in 1967. This was strategically motivated, related to territory. And conflicts have arisen from nations' desires to unite ethnically similar populations under one rule. Seen, for example, in the case of Korea, also Vietnam, and the ongoing situation between Taiwan and the People's Republic of China. However, these immediate causes don't solely trigger war. Underlying factors also play a significant role, and we'll look more at that in part 2 of the lecture. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you back here for the next part.